The wind at Cedar Creek cut through Samuel Granger's coat and sank deep into his bones. It was a late autumn wind, born high in the lonely mountains and carrying the first real threat of winter. The golden plain shivered under its sweep, the tall grass rustling like whispers against the station platform. Samuel stood with his collar turned up, hands shoved deep in his pockets, hating this wind. It reminded him of the day 3 years ago when he buried his wife Sarah and their little boy Daniel, a grief that had never left him. The 3 o'clock train was late. Samuel checked his pocket watch for the 4th time, impatience tugging at him. He should have been mending fences, not waiting for a woman he had never asked for. 2 days ago, a letter from his older sister Margaret arrived. She had taken it upon herself to answer a mail-order bride advertisement in Samuel's name. Young, respectable, and looking for a new start, it had said. Samuel's first reaction was cold rage. He did not want a new start. He wanted to be left alone with the memories he had. A long whistle cut through the wind, and the train rounded the bend, trailing smoke. Samuel's jaw tightened. His plan was simple. Meet this woman, explain the misunderstanding, and pay her passage back. It was cruel, but kinder than letting her into a house that was no longer a home. Passengers descended onto the dusty platform. Families, men in traveling coats. Children chasing each other around luggage carts. And then he saw her. She was slight, her back straight despite the effort it cost. Her dark hair was pinned simply under a battered hat. She clutched a single worn valise, her gaze sweeping the platform and the empty land beyond. She saw him watching and lifted her chin slightly. "Mr. Samuel Granger?" she said, voice low, precise, carrying the sound of the East. "Yes, ma'am. I am Samuel Granger. I am Eliza Marlo. It is a relief to finally be here," she said. He could not return the smile. He had to end this quickly. "There's been a grave misunderstanding. I am afraid you have come all this way for nothing. My sister Margaret took it upon herself to write to you. I did not send for a wife." Eliza froze, her eyes shifting from disbelief to quiet processing. She held the letter in her hand. "Your sister," she whispered. "I am sorry," Samuel said. "I will pay for your passage back. The next train east leaves in the morning." "No, thank you," she replied firmly. "I can find work in town. I am a seamstress." Samuel almost laughed. Town was a generous word for Cedar Creek, but she persisted, the pride in her face warring with exhaustion. And then he truly saw her. The shiver of hunger, the bruise on her side from the luggage, the 17 cents she held in her hand. The train's whistle blew again, and it began to move west. Gone. They were alone. The wind whipped harder, carrying the scent of dust and rain. Samuel could not leave her, not with only 17 cents and nowhere else to go. "All right," he said. "You can come to the ranch. 3 days. No more." The ride to the ranch was silent. The sun bled out of the sky, leaving streaks of orange and purple over the mountains. Samuel kept his eyes on the road, feeling the foreign warmth of her presence. 3 years of solitude had prepared him for one occupant, himself, not a woman. The ranch appeared as a dark silhouette against the dying light. Samuel helped her down, led her inside, and lit a lamp. The room smelled with smoke, leather, and lavender, the lingering memory of a woman long gone. "You can have the spare room," he said. "I'll get your bag." She stood in the middle of the room, taking in the clean but stark space. Her eyes fell on the small framed photograph on the mantel, a gentle woman holding a small boy who looked so much like Samuel. He returned with her valise. "I have chores to see to. There is cold stew and bread." "My concern is not be a burden," Eliza said. "I can work for my keep. I can cook, clean, mend." Samuel studied her, recognizing the quiet competence in her hands, the resilience in her eyes. For the first time, he did not see a mail-order bride. He saw a woman fluent in loss, capable of meeting the harsh demands of the frontier. That night, he left her alone in the lamplight. The silence was no longer hollow. She filled it with quiet motion, sorting, mending, and restoring order to a house that had been frozen in grief. He wondered uneasily if he had just invited change into his life. By morning, The first dawn breaking sharp across the plains, the house smelled of coffee. Eliza stood at the counter preparing breakfast. Samuel's heart jolted at the sight, her presence both unfamiliar and necessary. He watched her, the way she moved, precise and calm, transforming his empty home into a living place again. When the rain began, the fence needed mending. She followed him into the cold, into the wet, into the hard work of stretching wire and hammering posts. She did not complain. She kept pace. He could not help but admire her. By nightfall, the line shack offered shelter from the storm. She stood shivering, and he draped a blanket over her shoulders. The warmth between them was quiet, steady, and entirely new. Then the thunder cracked overhead, shattering the intimacy. They flinched, and the spell broke. The storm outside raged on. Yet inside, a new understanding began to form. A man and a woman alone together, learning to navigate each other's worlds. Samuel did not yet know what it meant, but he could feel the change. The storm passed, leaving a thick fog over Cedar Creek the next morning. The world outside the windows was gray and formless, but inside the ranch, a fragile rhythm had begun to take shape. Breakfast was quiet, the only sounds, the clink of spoons and the low crackle of the fire. Samuel and Eliza moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, each aware of the other's presence, yet cautious of crossing invisible boundaries. Samuel hitched the horses to the buckboard, preparing to take Eliza to the station for her return. The train waited, black and steaming, a stark reminder of the fragile promise he had made. His heart thudded as he looked at her, knowing that letting her go felt impossible. She followed him quietly, her small valise in hand, the mist wrapping around her like a shroud. At the platform, Samuel offered the pouch of money for her passage east. Eliza looked at it, then back at him, her expression unreadable. The train's whistle blew, a long, mournful cry that cut through the fog. She did not move. The train lurched forward, its wheels groaning over the rails, and in that moment, she made her decision. She missed it. The 3 days were over, yet she remained. Samuel felt a strange relief, tempered by an unfamiliar fear. The house would no longer be silent. He could no longer retreat into the hollow of his grief. Together, they rode back to the ranch, the morning fog curling around the wagon like smoke. Eliza's presence beside him was quiet but assertive, a constant reminder that the world had shifted. Back at the ranch, she set about restoring order. Dust disappeared from the sills. Curtains were washed. Mending was done with meticulous care. She created a ledger from Samuel's chaotic notes, turning confusion into clarity. For the first time in years, he could see his herd, his profits, his losses at a glance. He watched her work in the lamplight, feeling admiration mixed with the unease that always accompanied change. The tranquility was short-lived. Shots rang out. Samuel felt the searing pain of a bullet tearing through his left arm, almost knocking him from the saddle. Jake grabbed him, spurring his horse, and they fled the canyon, the mocking laughter of their enemies echoing behind them. Back at the ranch, Eliza met them at the door, calm despite the sight of Samuel bleeding. She set to work immediately, stripping the sleeve, cleaning the wound, and stitching it with steady hands. She worked like a surgeon, every motion precise, every decision deliberate. Samuel, usually a man of action, found himself helpless in a way he had not felt since losing Sarah and Daniel. And yet, here was a woman, a stranger, holding them together. Later, Sheriff Collins arrived with Tom to investigate. Eliza presented the newly organized ledger, proving each animal's brand and ownership. The sheriff's eyes widened at the detail. Samuel realized in that moment how much weight she carried, not only in skill but in courage. Hartley arrived shortly after, a storm in human form, his son Tommy in tow. Samuel faced him, his arm bandaged and still throbbing. Hartley's threats were bluster, but Samuel had learned to temper his anger. Eliza, standing by his side, spoke clearly and without fear, invoking law and logic against intimidation. Hartley, unable to counter her argument and wary of legal consequences, stormed off, leaving Samuel and Eliza victorious. Night fell over the ranch, but the tension lingered. Samuel turned to Eliza as she changed the dressing on his arm. You should not have done that. You made him angry. He was already angry, she said. I could not stand by and do nothing. Her quiet bravery struck Samuel deeper than any bullet or threat. She had faced the danger with nothing but logic and courage, and he realized with a start that he had begun to rely on her in ways he had not anticipated. She was no longer just a visitor in his house. She was part of the life he had built, and the grief he had guarded so carefully could no longer define the space they shared. The following days tested them further. Winter crept in, bringing with it snow and blizzards. Wolves howled outside their walls, hungry and bold. Samuel and his men tended the cattle, battling the storm, while Eliza maintained the house, feeding the men and keeping them dry. When the wolves grew daring, she faced them outside, rifle in hand, scaring them off with a single shot. Samuel watched her, a mixture of fear and admiration gripping his chest. By the time the blizzard ended, their small herd was scattered, and the search for the survivors became a collaborative effort with their former rival, Bill Hartley. The two ranchers, enemies for years, now rode side by side, gathering cattle and defending the land from the harshness of winter. Samuel saw a new respect in Hartley, and Hartley, in turn, noticed the competence and courage of Samuel's wife. Eliza orchestrated the efforts with quiet authority, coordinating supplies, tending to injuries, and ensuring no detail was overlooked. Through the shared struggle, Samuel and Eliza's partnership deepened. They moved through the days and nights with a new understanding, trust forming between them as they worked together to save their livelihood. Every shared glance, every unspoken coordination of effort cemented the bond that had begun on a foggy, wind-whipped platform. The Montana plains were harsh, unforgiving, and beautiful, and through the trials of stolen cattle, blizzards, and wolves, Samuel began to see that he was no longer alone. For the first time in years, the empty house no longer felt like a tomb. It was alive with her presence, with purpose, and most importantly, with hope. Spring arrived over Cedar Creek, washing plains in green and filling the ranch with life. The Stockmen's Association, born from Eliza's sharp plan and Samuel's leadership, had secured the valley against outside threats. Their unity with Hartley and the other ranchers created strength where there had once been division. The Granger ranch flourished. Eliza's pregnancy advanced, and Samuel watched it with a mixture of awe and worry. Every ache, every tired movement sent waves of fear through him. He knew the dangers of life on the plains, but he had never feared for anyone like this. She remained calm, steady, and resilient, proving herself a partner in every way. When the labor began on a sweltering August night, Samuel felt his past grief returning in sharp waves, memories of Sarah and Daniel haunting every second. But this time, he would not be powerless. Mrs. Gable, the midwife, guided Eliza through delivery while Samuel waited in the main room, pacing, praying, feeling each sound from the bedroom as if it were a blade through his heart. And then, amidst thunder and rain, a new cry broke through. Not a cry of pain, but of life. A daughter. Samuel's heart exploded with relief and joy. He entered the room to see Eliza, pale but radiant, cradling the tiny bundle. Her eyes met his, and the exhaustion, the fear, the relief, all mingled in a shared glance. "Come and meet your daughter, Samuel," she whispered. He approached, awestruck, and saw Abigail for the first time, her small, perfect face looking up at him. Tears streamed down his face. This child was not a ghost, not a replacement for the ones he had lost, but a new beginning, a promise of the future. Life on the ranch changed. Abigail's laughter echoed through the house and barn. Eliza's skills and leadership, once tested against storms and wolves, now directed the day-to-day of ranch life with calm efficiency. Samuel and Eliza grew into an easy partnership, their love built from trust, shared hardships, and respect. They faced winter blizzards, wolves, and rival ranchers together, each challenge binding them closer. The Stockmen's Association proved its worth against new threats. When railroad agents arrived with low offers and veiled warnings, Samuel and Eliza rallied the ranchers. Using the power of unity and legal strategy, they preserved their land and livelihoods. Eliza's intelligence and practical planning shone. Samuel recognized that she was not just his wife, but his equal, a partner in protecting their future. Over the years, the Granger ranch prospered. The Circle H was eventually purchased and divided fairly among the association members. Abigail grew into a spirited, intelligent child, the embodiment of her parents' resilience and courage. Samuel and Eliza, once tentative companions, now moved through life as a seamless team. Their house, once dark and silent, was filled with warm conversation and laughter. The past remained a shadow, but it no longer defined them. Samuel would visit the graves of Sarah and Daniel with Eliza and Abigail, sharing news of the ranch and their lives. He spoke of them not with sorrow, but as part of the story of survival and love. Abigail learned that love did not erase what came before. It multiplied and endured. Years passed. The valley prospered. The Stockmen's Association became a strong force, and the Granger Ranch stood as a symbol of perseverance. Samuel and Eliza's love matured from the cautious respect of the first days into a profound, steady devotion. They worked, raised their child, and nurtured the community around them. One summer evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the plains, Samuel stood on the porch, watching the land that had been hard-won and carefully tended. The wind at Cedar Creek no longer whispered grief. It sang of life, growth, and home. Inside, Eliza read by the fire. Abigail played nearby, and the house hummed with the quiet joy of a family united by love, perseverance, and the trials they had faced together. The years had healed, built, and transformed. Samuel's heart, once heavy with loss, now carried love, partnership, and hope. He had learned that life could bring new beginnings, even after devastation, and that trust, courage, and resilience could forge a family strong enough to withstand any storm. The Montana plains stretched before them, wild and beautiful. But for the Grangers, the wind now carried only the sound of promise.